Okay, so a few people so far, but we'll start. Okay, before we start the halacha, it's once again it's halacha and Tanya. So I want to just mention a little bit about this coming Friday, which is a fast of Asar B'Tevis. Generally speaking, we don't make fast days on Friday because we don't want to go into excuse me, we don't want to go into Shabbos while we're still fasting. The exception of this is Asar B'Tevis. Because if, let's say, Purim is Shabbos, we push up the fast to Thursday. But here, Asar B'Tevis is, in this respect, pretty strict, because there is an opinion on halacha that Asar B'Tevis, because that's when they made a wall around the city of Yerushalayim for 3 years and they started a siege. So there is an opinion in halacha. We don't rule like that, but, well, it's another thing. According to our calendar, the 10th of Tevis can never fall out on Shabbos. But there are opinions that say if it would, we would even fast on Shabbos. That's how strict it is, because it's the beginning of the destruction of the Bais Din. So just to go a little bit, so it's uncommon for a fast day to be on Friday. So here in LA, I can't tell you in any other city, but here in LA, the fast begins at 5:47 a.m. It's a fast less than 12 hours. The fast starts 5:47. Now, if you're planning to get up early to eat, before you go to sleep at night, you have to have in mind that you're going to be getting up early to eat or to drink. Otherwise, once you go to sleep, then the fast begins. So whether you're planning to get up early or not, I would strongly suggest just have in mind that in case I get up, I'll be able to eat or drink, because maybe you'll get up middle of the night if you want to take a drink or eat something or whatever. So the fast begins at 5:47. Now the fast, you're allowed to take a shower. You're allowed to, basically, the only restriction in a practical level is eating and drinking. You can't eat or drink. Shachris that day is a regular shachris, except we have sliches in middle of davening, we have the long Avinu Malkeinu, and we have Torah reading. Okay, so but otherwise the davening is really the same davening. Shachris like any other fast day. We have sliches in middle of davening, and we have the long Avinu Malkeinu at the end of sliches, and we have Torah reading 3 aliyahs. Now, in the afternoon, because you're going straight into Shabbos. Now, in other words, we break our fast when we make Kiddush Friday night. That's how we break our fast. So, which means like this, you have to daven mincha a little bit earlier, because mincha has Torah reading and a haftorah of fasting in the afternoon. But because it's Erev Shabbos, there's no tachnun, and therefore there's no Avinu Malkeinu. So what shuls generally do, they'll be starting mincha a little bit earlier, and then when they finish mincha, they'll go into Kabbalah Shabbos, they'll daven Friday night davening, regular Friday night davening, and then they make sure to daven, quicker, and that people should go home and eat, especially if they're careful not to make Kiddush between 6 and 7, that they should be able to go eat before 6 o'clock. So that's basically as far as Asar B'Tevis. The uniqueness is it's Friday. You break your fast when you make Kiddush Friday night. Obviously, those people that are not fasting don't fast, but those that are fasting, you break your fast after Ma'ariv, and then you go home and you make Kiddush. That's as far as Asar B'Tevis goes, and that's it. Otherwise, it's a regular fasting. Okay, to go back where we're, our last 2 weeks, there was no class because of Hanukkah. So what we're going to do tonight is continue where we left off before, and we're learning the laws of Tzedakah, of a person giving the laws of Tzedakah. We were discussing the importance of the mitzvah of Tzedakah, that whenever in Talmud Yerushalmi, in the Jerusalem Talmud, it says the word mitzvah, it means the mitzvah of Tzedakah. A person never gets poor from Tzedakah. The Jewish people are based on Tzedakah. Mashiach comes because of Tzedakah. And a person should not come along and think, how can I give Tzedakah? I'm going to, go broke. So the answer is it's Hashem's money. You're just managing the estate, so to speak. So therefore, what you're going to get anyway. Okay, so it's always a good idea. We're learning before davening. You should give tzedakah. Like the Gemara said, Rabbi Elazar used to give a pruta, a poor person, money, and then he davened. He quoted a pasuk, "Ani b'tzedek echse penecha," and like we learned, it's actually a good investment, because when we give Hashem tzedakah, then Hashem sees we give tzedakah, so He'll give us tzedakah, even though we don't necessarily deserve everything that we're asking from Hashem to give us. Okay, even a poor person, by the way, who gets tzedakah, receives tzedakah, also has to give tzedakah. And he can't say, well, I only have 2 cents, so how can I give tzedakah? So Shulchan Aruch says, yeah, but the other person doesn't even have 1 cent. So compared to him, you're twice as rich as he is. So then you still have to give tzedakah. And the Rebbe explained many times, the same thing is in a spiritual sense. A lot of times, somebody could say, how do you expect me to teach somebody else Torah? I myself am learning. I'm a student. I don't know anything. How do you expect me to teach somebody else Torah? And the answer is, by the din of tzedakah, the Rebbe would say, if somebody else is less knowledgeable than you, so compared to him, you're rich and you have an obligation to teach him. So that's it, generally speaking, what a person should do. Now, by a rich man's korban, a rich man's sacrifice, the Torah says, Reach nichayach, it's a good smell for Hashem. And by a poor man's offering a flower, the rich man brought an animal, if he had to bring sometimes certain korbanos, and a poor man would bring a flower offering. Yet the Torah would say, Reach nichayach by both. So the Gemara learned out what does it mean? Whether somebody is giving a little bit because that's what they can give, or he's giving a lot because that's what they can give, Hashem enjoys it. Hashem enjoys it very, very much. And but if a person who's able to give more gives less, so then Chazal don't like that idea too much. Then you're not fulfilling, like the Gemara says, a rich man who brought a poor man's sacrifice does not fulfill his obligation because he's being a poor man's sacrifice and he should be doing more. But what happens, and again, this always has to be discussed in a private shaila because every case is different. I mean, in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch it says, if somebody is going to be giving tzedakah, they're going to go into debt, then halachically you don't have to give tzedakah. You give what you can give, but you don't have to give like within 10%. Because by giving 10%, if a person makes $100, and they need $100 to live, and they give away $10 to tzedakah, 10%, so then they won't be able to live. So then you're not obligated to give the 10%. You give what you're obligated to give. Now, in the cities, there were the residents of the city. In fact, in the Chumash, it says like this, that if you see that the person was rich, and then he became poor. So the Torah said you have to give him Dei Machserei Asher Yachsolei. You have to give him what he's missing. And the Gemara says an interesting concept. That means if it was a rich man that had servants and horses and all that, and now he became broke, you have to give him back what the needs that he had, what he was accustomed to, but you don't have to make him rich. So then in the cities, in the Shtetlach, in the time of the Gemara, they had what was called the kupa and the tamchoy. They would give him money, they would give him meals. During the week, they give the poor people 2 meals a day. Shabbos, they would give them 3 meals a day. But poor people from your own city come before poor people of another city. Alpidin, family would come first. Family would come first because it says, "Mepsarcha al tesalem," don't forget about your own flesh and blood. And we'll discuss, what relatives you're allowed to give money to for the sake of tzedakah and so on. Okay, now, generally speaking, if possible, a person should give 10% from the profits that they make. Now, is that before taxes or after taxes? Many opinions say it's after taxes. In Kitzer, he says he's very lenient. He says you have to give 10% after you exclude household expenses. Again, what he means by that is, if by giving tzedakah you're not going to be having enough money for your household expenses, then you don't have to give the 10%. You give what you're able to do. Now, ideally, the Gemara says, ideally, the Gemara says like this: an average person should give 10%. If you want to do it better, you should give chaimish, which is 20%. But the Gemara says you should not give more than 20%. Why? Because then you're throwing away all your money, and then you're going to need people to give you money, and it's not a good thing to do. But in the time of the death, at death time, or in a will, you're allowed to give up to a third of your possession for tzedakah. Now, not forgetting the kids, the children, but you're allowed to give up to a third. In Tanya, in Igeres HaTshuva, the Alter Rebbe says that nowadays we sin. In the old days, he used to bring sacrifices, and we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. So how do we bring a sin offering? So in earlier times in history, they would fast. And the Arizal would say unbelievable amount of fasts. I'll give you an example. If somebody got angry, it was 171 fasts. And then there was two opinions. Every time you get angry, is it 171? Or for all the times you get angry, it's 171. There's a big question now. The Rebbe says what to do, but that doesn't apply today. The bottom line is that the Rebbe in Tanya says, this that the Gemara says, don't give more than 20%, is if a person doesn't sin. But if a person sins and he wants to redeem his soul, by giving tzedakah, so the Alter Rebbe says, just like somebody for their health, unless you're somebody like Jack Benny, he told me your money or your life, he said, let me think about it. But a normal person, he's not going to tell you he's dying, Nabuch, and he needs money to save his life. He's not going to say, okay, up to 20% of my money you could take to heal me, but more than that you can't. I mean, it's ridiculous. The pasuk says, Alter Rebbe quotes, Kol asher lo ish yitin ba'at nafsho. Whatever a person has, he's going to give away to save his life. So then the Alter Rebbe says, just like it is in the physical life, in the spiritual life, you can also give more than 20%. Now the question is a lot of interesting questions that come up. What can I give tzedakah to? I'll give you an example. It's interesting. There was a concert here in LA recently, and officially was a tzedakah organization doing it. So I got a lot of calls from people. Can I use the concert money? The money, let's say it was $50 a ticket, whatever. Can I use that $50 to buy the concert and go to the concert? Can I use tzedakah money for it? Because it's a tzedakah organization doing it. That's clear that you cannot do that. Because if I gave $50 and I'm not going to the concert, I'm giving it for tzedakah. But if you're going and enjoying yourself at a concert, so you can't use that money from tzedakah money. You're having an enjoyment. You're having entertainment. According to many opinions, if somebody, let's say Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, buys a seat in a show, okay? So technically, you cannot give that from tzedakah money. You're buying a seat. It's your seat. Nobody else can take it away from you. So if you want to make up with the shul, I'm giving tzedakah, whatever, that's a separate story. But let's say that the ticket, they asked me this also. Let's say a cheaper ticket is $25. A more expensive ticket is $50. So if I buy an expensive ticket, can I? So he said no. But if you give him $50 and you sit in a cheaper seat, then $25 of the $50 you could use for tzedakah, because you're getting benefit of $25, but you're giving them $50. So then you could use for tzedakah. A lot of issues, I don't want to go into all the details, and now people should really ask Shilas, can you pay tuition for your kids from tzedakah money? I'm giving Today, everybody knows tuition is crazy, exorbitant amount of money for tuition. So let's say I'm paying, which is very cheap. Let's say I'm paying $10,000 a kid. Can I use that $10,000 from tzedakah money? So the answer is really, it's a very complicated halachic issue, and I'll explain to you what the issue is. Something a person is obligated to do according to halacha, you cannot use tzedakah money. For instance, I want to buy myself a pair of tefillin. I can't buy myself a pair of tefillin with tzedakah money. You know, money that I set aside for tzedakah. You have an obligation to put on tefillin. It's not charity. You have an obligation to put on tefillin. You need to buy a pair of tefillin. If I buy tefillin for somebody else who doesn't have, that's tzedakah. But if I'm buying tefillin for myself, it's my obligation. How can I give tzedakah for something which is my obligation? Somebody wants to buy matzah for Pesach. You can't say, okay, it's $20 a pound. I'm buying 10 pounds and we use $200 for tzedakah. You can't. You're eating the matzah. It's a mitzvah that you have to do. When it comes to educating children, the halacha really is as follows. A father has an obligation to teach his child Torah. That's his obligation. If he wants to hire somebody else to do it for him, that's good. That's okay. You could do that. But again, you're paying for something which is your obligation to do. You should be teaching them. The father should be teaching them. He doesn't want to, he can't, whatever the reason is. So then he's hiring somebody else to do it. But you can't take that from tzedakah money. Now, what you could do, there's a number of things that you could do. First of all, there's a very interesting argument between boys and girls. There are opinions in Shulchan and Allah that want to say a father doesn't have an obligation to teach his daughter Torah. So therefore, if a father sends his daughter to school, that could be used from tzedakah. But Dr. Rebbe doesn't agree with that. Many opinions don't agree with that. Why? Because parents have an obligation that their children should grow up religious. Doesn't matter boy or girl. He might not have an obligation to teach her Torah, but he has to teach her everything she knows to be a religious girl and a religious mother. And he has an obligation to teach her, which, as the Rebbe says, is enough Torah to learn for many lifetimes. So when I'm sending my daughter to school, see, years ago, the girls stayed home. There was no school for girls. The mother taught them everything they needed to know. So that was the way it went. Now we don't do that for millions of reasons. So we send the daughter to school for what? To learn how to be a religious child. That again is an obligation of the father. So therefore, it's not so simple that you could take tzedakah money using as tuition for your daughters. Sons for sure, not daughters. But there are certain loopholes. For instance, and this again, if the school agrees to it. Let's say tuition is $10,000 a kid. And I tell the school, you can't do this for the IRS, by the way. The school can't do it and you can't do it. But for the tzedakah obligation, you can do it technically. And that is, you come to the school and you say, listen, I'm giving you the $10,000. Okay? But let's make it $5,000 tuition and $5,000 tzedakah. That means you're charging me really $5,000 for tuition, but I'm giving you 10, and 5 is counted as tzedakah. Now, for the books, you can't do that. It doesn't work legally. But halachically, if the school agrees, you can't make it, by the way, 1 penny tuition and $990, that doesn't work. But if you make something normal, like $5,000 tuition, $5,000 tzedakah, and the school agrees with it, halachically, that's fine. Then other poskim write another 80 you could do. I pay your tuition, and you pay my tuition. I can't pay my own tuition because it's my obligation. But if I'm paying your tuition, and you're paying my tuition, then some poskim hold you could do that. And that's a way to get around the obligation of tzedakah. Okay? Now, if somebody, cousin in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, if you want to do a good deed for yourself, you should force the Yetzer Hara, and everything that you build for Hashem should be the nicest. You build a shul, it should be nicer than your homes. If you give something to eat to a poor person, it should be better food than you eat yourself. You want to give him clothing, give him better clothing than you give yourself. Basically like that. Another din is like this. If somebody, according to halacha, and many poskim say today is a different world. According to Shulchan Aruch, a father has, it's going to sound crude, but in the olden days, this was the way it worked. A father has an obligation to support his children under the age of 6. Over the age of 6, he has no halachic obligation. The Gemara says we're going to put you into excommunication and we're going to curse you and that. So, but let's not, today you can't do that. Okay, because until they get married, it's accepted as the parent's obligation to support the child. But let's say you have a married child and you want to help them financially. That money for sure is considered tzedakah. Whatever you give them is counted for tzedakah. They're poor. They need the money. You're giving it to them. Why should you give somebody else? Your family comes first, we said before. Your halacha mebsachal to salam, your family comes first. So therefore, if you support your married children, it's not an issue. It's fine. Okay. Again, there's a lot of dinim in tzedakah, but we're not learning all of them. We're learning it's the general ideas of tzedakah. What's very important in giving tzedakah is like this. First of all, there's an interesting din. We mentioned, I think, the other week. If a poor man asks you for tzedakah, you have an obligation biblically to give him something. You can give him a nickel, but you have to give him something. You can't let a poor person who asks you for money and not, if you don't have, you don't have. So then halacha says, what should you do? What's very important, okay, it says like this. If you give tzedakah to a poor man with a rotten attitude, your panim rois, your face is evil, and he said, even if you gave him 1,000 golden coins, you lose your merit. And it also says, the pasuk says, don't be bad when you give it to him. You have to give him with a smile. Therefore, it says in Allah, what happens if a poor man comes to you? You don't have any money on you. You don't have money. So you could smile at him and say, I'm very sorry. I wish you the best. I just don't have any money now. That's also a mitzvah. But you can't scream at a person, okay, that you're giving. You have to give him with a good face, smiling at him, and so on. Now, another interesting din, there's a din in halacha as follows. Years ago, people used to come by bus or by car or whatever. And let's say somebody was in a shul for Shabbos, and they want to take a bus home. But they're Shabbos, they don't have any money. They're very wealthy. They just don't have money on them. So halachically, they're allowed to take tzedakah money, even though they're very wealthy. They're allowed to take tzedakah money to get a ride home. Uber today, Uber, taxi, bus, whatever. You're very wealthy. Why are you taking tzedakah money? Halacha says, bottom line, now you're poor. Right now, I don't have money. In the bank, you have millions of dollars. Doesn't matter. Right now, I'm broke. So you're allowed to take tzedakah money. I mean, ideally, the guy should pay it back. But halachically, you don't have to pay it back. And right now, I'm poor. I'm allowed to take the tzedakah money. I'm taking the tzedakah money and then getting a ride home. That would also be allowed. It says you have to be very careful because when a poor man screams, the pasuk says, when a poor man screams out to Hashem, Hashem listens. So we don't want to get poor people or widows or orphans, all those types of people. We don't want to make them feel bad. Now, another thing is, tzedakah, when a person pledges money to tzedakah, it's a vow. It's a vow. Can't say I didn't mean it. Just like you make a vow, I pledge something as a vow, you have to do it. If somebody pledges money to tzedakah, they have to give it. And the Shruch says, if there's a poor person, you have to give it right away. Yeah, if there's not, and if, by the way, if there's a poor person and you don't give it right away, you're transgressing another negative commandment that the Torah says about al te'achar, don't delay giving him the money. Okay? Because you're able to give right away. Now, what happens? The guy pledges $100 to poor people, and there's no poor people around. Okay, so then when he has an opportunity, he gives it to poor people, he gives it to an organization, or things like that. Now, what happens if he pledged money to a shul or an institution? He's not transgressing until the Gabbai Tzedakah, the guy he's collecting for the shul, is asking you for the money. Now, another thing people do, and a lot of people do this today, you're allowed to take money, let's say you have money to give tzedakah from. You could put the money off at the side. And then when you have a chance, you give it. So a lot of people have a special tzedakah fund. They have a fund, an account in the bank. And when they have money that they have to give tzedakah from, they put it into that account. And it accumulates money. And then they give it out accordingly when they want, how they want, to whom they want. That's not an issue. That they could do. Or if you don't have, you could put in a pushka and just give it when you're able to do it. Now, there's another very important thing with tzedakah. We're going to finish with this and then go to Tanya. And this is a mistake a lot of people make. Let's say you have different tzedakah boxes for different organizations. You are not allowed to change from one organization to the next. Let's say you have an organization of school number 1 and a shul number 1. And I'm putting money into the tzedakah box of the school. And one day I said, you know what? I'm going to take this money from the school and give it to the shul. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to. A tzedakah box, unless when you started putting money in that pushki, you had in mind it's not for this organization that's on the tzedakah box. I'm just using the box, but it's not. But if you have a tzedakah box and you're putting money into that tzedakah box, bottom line is you're donating it to that particular organization. And you can't change tzedakahs. It's clear din in halacha. It's even a bigger problem. Sometimes tzedakah monies get mixed up. You can, especially the kids do this. They're on their own. They're taking the pushkas and they're mixing them together, and it's a very big halachic issue. Because halachically, the money from this tzedakah box has to go to that organization that's named on the tzedakah box. You can't put it into another box or use it for another box. So if kids come along and mix money up, and all the pushkas are mixed up, or a pushka falls apart, and whatever it is, you have to ask a shayla what to do. It's not so simple. Because you're stealing money from that particular tzedakah because you can't change it. Okay, we're going to leave it here, and now we're going to go to Tanya.